Okay, I'm going to teach you today how to frame an issue. We've been working on essays where authors make arguments, and one of the skills that they use to persuade their audience, to get them to agree with them, is framing an issue. So take a look at the definition with me. It's on your paper. When authors frame issues, they ask the audience to focus on a certain way of seeing the issue or topic. Framing an issue is like putting a frame around a picture, or in digital terms, using an editing program to crop and resize a photograph to focus the viewer's eye on the part of the picture you think is most important. You might also think of it as the lens on the camera through which you view the issue. So, it's a technique. Writers use this technique to persuade their audience to agree with their viewpoint, or at least to consider a smaller component of a larger issue. We've been reading essays about larger issues that essays then frame and get you to focus on one component of that. And that's what I'm going to teach you how to do today, is to be able to take a larger issue, shrink it, and get the writer and the reader, your reader, to focus on that, that smaller component that you want them to focus on. So let me just take a look at an example of that from the first essay we read in this unit. The larger topic that Jessica Statsky was getting at in her essay, Children Need to Play, Not Compete, she was tackling the issue of competitive sports and the influence of that on young children. That's the larger issue. And what she did in her essay was shrink it and frame it to convince you and to convince me that it had a negative effect on young children. So one of the ways she did that is using a physical health frame. So she's getting you to think about the physical health ramifications and influences on children who are young. And remember from the essay, 6 to 12 years old. So she wants you to think about just the physical health. Think what you want about competition, but focus on the physical health of the children. And here's the way she frames it. Look at her argument. This is one way she did that in the essay. She said, the danger of overly competitive sports is that they entice children into physical actions that are bad for growing bodies. And so what she's doing there is getting the reader to start thinking about the physical health of the kid. Age 6 to 12, growing bodies, they have very specific and different needs than adults do. And she's trying to get people to think about the different ways that adults compete and how competition is not appropriate for kids. It's not appropriate based on what she's framing here. It's not appropriate because of physical health. And this would be considered a physical health frame. So there are multiple ways you can frame an argument, and this is just one of them. Here's another example. In her essay, she takes a look at a psychological frame. She wants you to think about the psychological health and well-being of children. And by framing the argument and focusing just on that, it might help somebody that's very competitive, values competition, sees that that's very important for young people to be able to do, so they don't quit, so they don't give up, those kinds of lessons that people on the competitive side often argue for. She's trying to get them to think more psychologically for the kid, and here's what she argues. She says, when young children cannot live up to their parents' and coaches' high expectations, they can become discouraged and depressed. And depression is a psychological mental illness, and she's trying to get people that maybe don't think about this to think more about what happens to children. Remember from the essay, you had one children that had so much anxiety he forced himself to throw up rather than play in a football game. So it's very important to her to use that anecdote and show with a psychological frame, how does that influence young people. She says it's negative, and that's her argument. All right, so let's try one together. Now, we've got the example of the large topic of the influence of video games on children. Can anyone think of either positive, negative, any type of argument you could make that is under the physical health frame? Right? Kyle?
They don't go outside enough.
They don't go outside enough here. So who are they, children?
Yeah.
Children do not go outside enough. And what is the value of going outside? Like, why do they need to be going outside for their physical health?
To like promote like better, like I don't know how to
You got it. Promoting better what? I mean,
Promoting better fitness.
Better fitness, okay. Children do not go outside enough, and video games do not promote physical fitness.
Yeah.
Okay. Video games do not promote physical fitness. Now, we'll look at these on a whole screen in just a minute. You can't do that on a keynote. Now, anybody have one for a psychological frame, either good or bad? Yeah, that's it.
Might cause to influence, promote violence among other people.
Okay, and which type of video games? I mean, would it,
Mostly video games that contain guns, stabbing, murder, you know,
Okay.
which are seen as perfectly fine in the virtual world.
okay. So video games that contain guns, violence, murder. Violence and murder can, you said promote and create violent individuals?
Right.
Violent, or children, we're focused on children. So let's move on to the third example. You can write this down on your paper that you have, where we're going to look at the influence of social media on society. And this is closely related to the essay we just read. So think of a social frame, right? Think of an educational frame and a political frame, and make a one-sentence beginning of an argument where you're framing whether it's positive or negative. What are the social influences of social media? Like, how does that affect people socially? How does that affect the world of education and the world of politics? All right, so I'll give you a minute, and if you have a question, just let me know. You can go ahead and work on this for a couple minutes, and then we'll share some responses. Let's just take a look at a couple. Does anybody have an example of a social frame? Yeah? Matt?
People are more connected and become more understanding through those connections.
People are more connected and become more understanding?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're easily more relatable. So
I have a very similar thing, which is social media, it gives people a sense of unity,
Okay.
where they're all reading the same thing, they're all seeing the same thing, and then they talk about it. So it
Okay.
gives them a sense of unity.
Excellent. So if you connect those two, we could kind of build those two, because you're talking about them being more understanding, right? And that would be something that you're talking about empathy, especially that What Makes Us Moral essay we read. It creates a space for that because they're more connected. They're not as isolated. And then that creates a space, if you want to use the language of unity, right? You could use either one of those words, and that would be a great way to talk about the social influence of social media. Now, what about an educational frame? Anyone have positive, negative, anything? Anybody have one for educational? You got a new one? Okay. Taylor?
Social media sites that promote education or scientific knowledge, such as pages owned by like Church Today or Science and other pages like that.
Promoting scientific knowledge, and is it
Can
about
help spread scientific knowledge over a larger community than would be otherwise possible.
over a larger community than otherwise would be possible? That's good. Right, and then let's do one more for political, political frame. Anyone else? New? Got the same hands, Anyone got a new one? Yeah, Julie.
Well, like, when they have the revolution in Egypt, they used, like, Twitter to quickly, like, you know, how they tweeted, like, the revolution is happening?
Right.
So, social media can, like, spark different, like, political feelings and ideas and, like, spread them really easily to, like, a really wide audience.
And spread them easily to a wide audience.
Yeah.
That's good. So let's take a look at these. These are really good. Oh, of course. Yeah, fancy. Okay, so if you take a look at these, what we've just done is framed a larger argument about social media and its influence on society, and we just chiseled it down and framed it so that we can just focus on something small and make our reader pay attention to some part of the argument that they're not either noticing or wouldn't have otherwise paid attention to if you hadn't brought it to their attention. So here, the example, people are more connected and become more understanding because of it, building a sense of unity. So, social frame. The educational frame, promoting scientific knowledge and spreading it over a larger community than otherwise would be possible, right? This just shows how people can teach each other. I mean, it promotes teaching and learning. And the political one, the example, Julia, that you brought up, social media can spark different political feelings and ideas and spread them easily to a wide audience. And there are huge implications for people knowing what's happening right now everywhere in the world. Right, so these are great. Let's just think of one more before we wrap up here. What are some other ways we could have framed this? That instead of political, educational, social, can we think of another one? Yeah, Chris?
Psychological,
Okay, psychological, right? And what could we think of for that?
cyberbullying, kids getting bullied online and into depression.
Perfect example. So I think you guys have a pretty good understanding of this, and we're going to be using this in our papers, so bear